Okay, let's take a look at the front half of the gun. Okay, as you can see, we've moved on down a bit farther. We'll show you the tip later. Last, this is the cup assembly. This is, of course, a gravity-fed gun. Your cup actually screws on or it pops on. Be sure you have a hole, which is not shown on this, but sure you have a hole in the top part of this, because if it doesn't have a hole, the vacuum of the gun will build up and cause it to actually explode and pop the top off the gun. You won't necessarily fill the gun up. That'll be pretty much too much paint to use. You'll keep it about, I would say, 1/3 to 1/4 of the way up. Your paint will come down through the gun. It'll settle here in this reservoir. When you pull back on the trigger, it slides the needle back in the assembly, and it forces air to come through. This will give you a flow of the gun. Make sure you do not fill this up. It's not a good idea to fill these things up all the time, because you're not going to use that much paint, especially for this type of gun. It's basically for detailing. But it is a good idea that when you use this type of gun, to make sure this is always kept clean. Again, if you have a siphon type of airbrush gun, the air will come from the bottom area here. It sucks up the paint. And it's a little bit easier to use for me, because once I'm done with the color, instead of washing this whole assembly out here and going to another color, I can just pop the bottle off or the color cup, run a quick cleaner through the gun, which will clean all of this out and the front part of the needle. I'll put another color on and I'm ready to go. Now let's look at the tip of the gun. Okay, as you can see, we've reached the tip of the gun. And of course, you've seen the trigger. When you pull back on the trigger, that actually pulls the needle back. Depending on what type of gun you have, where the paint comes from, top or bottom, that's going to activate your paint. When you pull the trigger back, it's going to force paint into here. Of course, what I have highlighted here in the pink is your tip of your gun. Probably the most important part of the gun. If you damage this area here, your gun is going to spray either a split pattern or a wide pattern. So you definitely want to make sure that is clean. As you can see, there are two parts highlighted in the yellow. This is your head of your gun. There's the inner head and there's the outer head. This is basically designed to protect the tip of the gun and the needle. If you can take this tip off, most guns, these two parts will disassemble from each other. Take this part off. Generally is what airbrush artists use when they're going to go into full detail. This area here usually have 3 to 5 holes. These holes in the gun actually create a vacuum and pushes the paint to a tip and causes it to come out in such a fine area. So that's the general basic working compartments of an airbrush.